Somewhere deep down, you already know this is true. Your problem is not that you do not know what to do. Your problem is that too often you do not do what you know. You know you should get up. You know you should focus. You know you should stop delaying, stop escaping, stop giving your strongest hours to weak habits. And yet, day after day, something keeps pulling you back into the same patterns. That is what makes this painful. Because the enemy is not ignorance. The enemy is self-betrayal. It is the quiet moment when you know what is right and still choose what is easy. The moment when you promise yourself change and then break that promise in silence. The moment when your mind reaches for discipline, but your body, your mood, or your impulse takes control. And if that pattern is not broken, it does not just steal your time, it steals your confidence, your focus, your self-respect. Piece by piece, it turns a strong mind into a divided one. This video is about that war. The war between who you could become and what you keep obeying. The war between your higher nature and your lower habits. The war most people lose long before anyone sees the damage. So stay with me, because in this journey, we are not just talking about discipline. We are uncovering why it keeps slipping away, how the Stoics understood this battle better than most people do even now, and what it really takes to become someone who can command himself in a world designed to weaken his will. Let us begin with the first battle. Chapter 1. The first battle. You keep losing. Most people think their life is shaped by big decisions. It is not. Your life is shaped by the small moments where your comfort is stronger than your command. That is where your future is decided. Not in the dramatic speech, not in the New Year promise, not in the perfect plan written on a Sunday night, but in the ordinary, forgettable moments where nobody is watching and you are faced with a choice that seems too small to matter. Get up or stay down. Work or delay. Endure or escape. Stay silent or complain. Control yourself or obey the impulse. That is where a human being is built. And that is also where most people quietly fall apart. Because the truth is, most people are not destroyed by tragedy. They are destroyed by indulgence, by softness, by delay, by the slow habit of surrendering to every passing feeling as if every emotion deserves obedience. They do not mean to become weak. Almost nobody chooses weakness directly. They just keep choosing comfort in moments that ask for courage. And over time, comfort becomes a master. That is the danger. The danger is not pain. The danger is becoming the kind of person who cannot bear even a little discomfort without immediately reaching for relief. Think about how many lives are run by impulse. A person says they want peace, but they feed their mind with noise all day. They say they want discipline, but they negotiate with every craving. They say they want greatness, but they cannot win a battle against a pillow, a plate, a screen, a mood, or an excuse. Then they wonder why they feel powerless. But power was never going to appear by accident. Power is built through self-command. And self-command is not built in the future. It is built in the moment when you least feel like doing what is right. This is why the first battle of the day matters so much. The alarm rings. Your eyes open. And for one quiet moment, before the world enters your room, you meet yourself exactly as you are. No performance, no audience, no reputation, no motivational quote, no polished identity, just you and your level of discipline. And that moment tells the truth. Because when the mind says, get up, and the body says no, someone is going to rule. Either reason will rule or appetite will rule. Either the higher part of you will take command, or the lower part of you will drag the day downward before it has even begun. That is why waking up is never just about waking up. It is a declaration. It is the first proof of whether you belong to your principles or to your impulses. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He did not speak to himself like a man waiting for inspiration. He spoke to himself like a man returning to duty. He reminded himself that he was rising to the work of a human being. There is something powerful in that. He was an emperor, and still he had to fight the same war that you fight. The war against reluctance. The war against softness. The war against that voice that says, "Not now." This is important, because many people think discipline is for a special kind of person. They think some people are just born stronger, more focused, more driven, more mentally tough. But Stoicism does not begin there. Stoicism begins with the understanding that the mind must be trained, that human beings are naturally pulled by pleasure, fear, laziness, ego, and distraction. That chaos is normal, that weakness is common, that clarity is rare, and that discipline is not a personality trait. It is a practice. That should give you hope, because it means your current weakness is not your final identity. Your bad habits are not your destiny. Your inconsistency is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you are untrained. And anything untrained can be trained, but only if you stop lying to yourself. That is where the path begins, not with self-hatred, not with dramatic guilt, not with calling yourself useless and promising that tomorrow will be different. It begins with honesty, brutal, clean, quiet honesty. You are not tired all the time. Sometimes you are undisciplined. You are not always overwhelmed. Sometimes you are scattered because you refuse to direct your attention. You are not always unlucky. Sometimes you are living without structure and calling the consequences misfortune. This is hard to hear, but it is liberating. Because what can be named can be confronted. What can be confronted can be trained. And what can be trained can be transformed. Most people avoid this moment of truth because it threatens the story they tell themselves. It is easier to say life is hard than to admit you have become dependent on ease. It is easier to say you need motivation than to admit you have made your feelings your leader. It is easier to say the world is distracting than to admit you have not built a mind strong enough to resist distraction. But Stoicism asks more from you. It asks you to stop blaming the world for the weakness you are still tolerating in yourself. That is not cruelty. That is respect. The Stoics respected human beings enough to tell them the truth. You have more control than you are using. Not control over the weather. Not control over the economy. Not control over other people, their opinions, their betrayals, their moods, or their mistakes. But control over your judgment. Control over your response. Control over what you reinforce. Control over what you repeat. Control over whether you act like a slave to impulse or a guardian of your own character. That is where freedom lives. Not in doing whatever you feel like doing. That is not freedom. That is appetite without a master. That is a dog chasing every scent. That is a leaf blown by every wind. Freedom is harder than that. Freedom is being able to feel an urge without kneeling before it. Freedom is hearing the call of comfort and still choosing effort. Freedom is having anger rise in you and refusing to let it speak as your representative. Freedom is being tired, tempted, irritated, distracted, and still remaining under your own command. That is the kind of freedom most people never taste. because they confuse ease with peace. But ease is not peace. Ease is often sedation. It numbs. It dulls. It weakens. It gives relief without building strength. Peace is different. Peace is what comes when there is order inside you. Peace is what comes when your mind is no longer a battlefield ruled by every impulse. Peace is what comes when your actions begin to align with your values. Peace is earned through self-mastery. And that is why discipline matters so much. Not because it makes you impressive, not because it makes you productive in the shallow modern sense, not because it helps you look strong online. It matters because without discipline, your life does not belong to you. It belongs to your moods, your cravings, your distractions, your habits, your excuses, your fears. And these things are terrible rulers. They promise comfort and deliver regret. They promise relief and deliver dependency. They promise pleasure and deliver emptiness. How many times has your own impulse betrayed you? How many times has it told you to postpone what mattered? How many times has it told you to quit because progress was slow? How many times has it told you to say what you later regretted? How many times has it traded your future for a moment of ease? This is why the Stoic does not worship feelings. Feelings are real, but they are not always wise. Desire is loud, but it is not always right. Fear is persuasive, but it is not always telling the truth. The disciplined person understands this. They do not ask, "What do I feel like doing?" They ask, "What is required?" That question can change a life. What is required now? Not next week. Not when the mood arrives. Not when conditions become ideal. Now. What is required when the alarm rings? What is required when you are tempted to delay? What is required when your pride wants the last word? What is required when the easy path is calling your name? The answer is usually simple. Get up. Begin. Hold your tongue. Do the work. Endure the discomfort. Return to the path. Simple does not mean easy. This is where many people get confused. They keep searching for a more complicated answer because the simple answer demands action. They want another book, another video, another system, another trick, another burst of motivation. But often the truth is painfully plain. You do not need a new method. You need more obedience to what you already know. That is what makes discipline so confronting. It removes the romance. It removes the illusion. It reveals that character is built in repetition. A person becomes trustworthy by repeatedly telling the truth. A person becomes calm by repeatedly refusing unnecessary anger. A person becomes strong by repeatedly doing what is difficult. A person becomes disciplined by repeatedly denying the rule of impulse. Brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day, the self is formed. And here is the part many people do not want to hear. Every time you betray your own standard, you teach yourself something. You teach yourself that your word means little. You teach yourself that discomfort can move you. You teach yourself that excuses work on you. You teach yourself that you can be persuaded away from your own intention. Do that long enough and self-respect begins to rot. That is why broken discipline hurts so deeply. It is not just about the missed workout, the wasted hour, or the abandoned goal. It is about the silent message sent inward. I cannot trust myself. Very few pains are heavier than that. When your own mind stops believing your promises, life becomes hard in a way outsiders cannot see. You start living with friction inside. You hesitate when making commitments because some part of you already expects betrayal. You lower your standards to avoid disappointment. You begin to confuse self-protection with laziness. You call it being realistic, but often it is fear built on the memory of your own inconsistency. This is why discipline is not merely a tool for achievement. It is a path back to self-trust. Every small kept promise matters. Get up when you said you would. Do the work when you said you would. Stop when you said you would stop. Stay silent when silence is wiser. Keep moving when comfort tells you to fold. These actions look small from the outside. Inside, they are rebuilding the foundation. And once a person begins rebuilding that foundation, something changes. They walk differently. They think differently. They speak with less noise. They no longer need to announce what they are going to do. They become less addicted to talking and more devoted to action. That is the beginning of real transformation. Not excitement, not hype, not endless planning, quiet evidence. The Stoics understood that a person's philosophy means nothing until it enters behavior. Wisdom that cannot wake you up, sharpen your focus, restrain your temper, and order your day is only decoration. Beautiful language is useless if your habits remain ugly. That is why this path is demanding. It does not let you hide behind ideas. It asks, can you govern yourself? Can you bear a little discomfort without collapsing into complaint? Can you act on principle when your feelings rebel? Can you remain steady when nobody is clapping for you? These are the real questions, and life asks them every single day. Not once, not twice, daily. The first battle may be with the snooze button. The second may be with your attention. The third may be with your tongue. The fourth may be with your appetite. The fifth may be with your tendency to escape into entertainment, fantasy, gossip, self-pity, or blame. Different masks, same enemy. The enemy is the ungoverned self. And that enemy is dangerous precisely because it lives inside your own skin. It knows your weaknesses. It speaks in your own voice. It always has a reason. It always sounds reasonable in the moment. Rest a little more. Start later. You deserve it. This is too much. You can skip once. Say what you feel. Check the phone. Eat the thing. Buy the thing. Delay the task. Protect your ego. Avoid the discomfort. Stay where it is easy. That voice has ruined more lives than open enemies ever could, because an external enemy can only attack from outside. But the internal enemy opens the gates from within. This is why Stoicism begins not with controlling the world, but with mastering the self. You do not need to conquer cities. You need to conquer your own impulses. You do not need a larger audience. You need a stronger mind. You do not need to become more interesting to others. You need to become less easily ruled by yourself. That is the beginning of dignity. And if something in this chapter is already pressing on a truth you have been avoiding, stay with me through this journey. And when this video is over, I want you to leave one honest sentence in the comments. What impulse has been ruling your life the most? That kind of honesty matters. It turns passive listening into real self-confrontation. And if this path of discipline and stoic clarity is the kind of path you want to keep walking, be here for the next chapters, because this is where the work begins. Not tomorrow morning. Not on the first day of next month. Not when life becomes less chaotic. Now. The next time the alarm rings, the next time your hand reaches for distraction. The next time discomfort asks you to kneel, remember this: your life is being shaped. In that ordinary moment, something invisible but permanent is being decided. Are you strengthening the part of you that leads, or the part of you that obeys every impulse? That is the first battle. And until you win it, nothing greater can truly be built. Say less, excuse less, delay less, rise. Because the person you become is hidden inside the choices you repeat. And the first choice is always closer than you think. Chapter 2: Voluntary Hardship and the Death of Softness. One of the strangest tragedies of the modern world is that people are surrounded by more comfort than ever before, yet they feel weaker than ever. Everything is made easy. Food arrives without effort. Entertainment is available without limit. Silence is replaced instantly. Boredom is medicated. Discomfort is avoided. Waiting is treated like suffering. Even the smallest inconvenience feels like an attack on our peace. And because of this, many people lose something they do not even realize they are losing: their tolerance for difficulty. This is dangerous because a person who cannot tolerate discomfort cannot be trusted by life. The moment life becomes heavy, they begin to break. The moment things stop going their way, they panic. The moment pain enters the room, they start searching for the fastest escape. But life does not ask whether you enjoy difficulty. Life brings it anyway. Loss comes anyway. Failure comes anyway. Illness comes anyway. Stress comes anyway. Fatigue comes anyway. Rejection comes anyway. Disappointment comes anyway. And when those moments arrive, the person who has spent years worshipping comfort suddenly discovers that comfort has made them fragile. This is why the Stoics practiced something that sounds almost offensive to the modern mind: voluntary hardship. To most people, this makes no sense. Why choose discomfort when comfort is available? Why take the harder path when the easier path is right there? Why train for pain you do not yet have? Because the Stoics understood something profound. If you only do what is easy, your character will become weak. If you only move when conditions are favorable, your discipline will become fake. If you build your life around convenience, then inconvenience will feel like catastrophe. Voluntary hardship is not self-punishment. It is preparation. It is the conscious decision to deny yourself ease in small ways so that ease does not become your ruler. The point is not misery. The point is freedom. The point is to prove to yourself that you can do without, that you can endure, that you do not need to obey every appetite the moment it speaks. This is one of the deepest forms of discipline. To willingly choose what is difficult when you could have chosen what is easy. Not because you hate yourself, not because pain is noble by itself, but because softness is expensive. Softness costs focus. Softness costs resilience. Softness costs self-respect. Softness costs your ability to stay upright when life stops cooperating. A person who always chooses comfort is like a blade never used. It may look polished, but it has no edge. And modern life is full of polished people with no edge. They look functional. They look normal. They look successful from the outside, but they are internally fragile. A bad mood ruins the day. A criticism ruins the week. A setback destroys momentum. A little boredom sends them running toward distraction. A little stress sends them reaching for whatever numbs the feeling fastest. That is not strength. That is dependency. And the Stoic path wants to break that dependency. Think of what happens every time you choose a small hardship on purpose. You take the cold shower instead of the warm one. You walk when driving would be easier. You sit in silence instead of grabbing the phone. You stop eating when the hunger is not physical but emotional. You do the work while still tired. You stay with the discomfort instead of immediately trying to erase it. Each time, you are teaching yourself something. I can endure this. I do not need immediate relief. Discomfort does not own me. I can remain under command even when pleasure is absent. That is the real training. Voluntary hardship trains the nervous system. It trains identity. It trains your relationship with pain. It rewires the mind to stop interpreting every discomfort as an emergency. That is important because one of the reasons people fail at discipline is not that the task is impossible. It is that the task feels uncomfortable and they have spent years treating discomfort as a signal to stop. This is one of the greatest lies you can believe. That discomfort means danger. That difficulty means something is wrong. That resistance means you should turn back. No, very often, discomfort is the proof that you are finally leaving the prison of ease. And that prison is subtle. It does not look like chains. It looks like convenience. It looks like indulgence. It looks like saying yes to yourself all the time. It looks like making life easier in every possible way until your spirit has forgotten how to carry weight. That is why hardship matters. Hardship reminds you what you are. A human being is not made for endless indulgence. A human being is made for effort, for duty, for adaptation, for endurance, for carrying burdens with dignity. This is why, after too much comfort, many people do not actually feel happy. They feel empty. Because comfort without challenge creates stagnation. Pleasure without effort creates dullness. Ease without meaning creates restlessness. The soul begins to decay in a life where nothing demands strength. This is why so many people live in comfort and still feel internally miserable. They have heat, food, entertainment, convenience, softness, distraction, and endless stimulation, but they do not feel alive. Because what they are missing is not more pleasure. It is friction. It is demand. It is responsibility. It is the feeling of meeting resistance and rising to it. It is the sense that they are becoming someone through effort. The Stoics knew that the soul hardens beautifully under pressure when the pressure is faced willingly. That is the key. Willingly. When life forces suffering on you, you may survive it. But when you choose small discomforts on purpose, you become different. You stop seeing yourself as helpless. You stop seeing pain as purely negative. You begin to build a private confidence that cannot be purchased. This is the confidence of someone who has tested themselves, not loudly, not for show, not for applause, quietly, in the small, hidden acts that nobody celebrates. Turning off the screen when you want more stimulation, holding the tongue when you want to react, finishing the task when you want to delay, waking early when the body wants more sleep, choosing simplicity when appetite wants excess, continuing the workout when the mind begins to negotiate. This is where hardness is forged. And it matters because life does not care how many quotes you saved, how many books you read, or how many times you said you wanted to be stronger. Life will test what is real. When fatigue hits, what is real? When rejection comes, what is real? When loneliness visits, What is real? When your plans collapse, what is real? When no one is encouraging you, what is real? In those moments, borrowed motivation disappears. Identity is exposed. Training reveals itself. And the person who has practiced voluntary hardship is different. They are not shocked by difficulty. They are not offended by discomfort. They are not surprised that life asks something from them. They have already been asking something from themselves. That is why they remain steadier. There is a dignity in this. A person who can deny themselves what is easy becomes very hard to manipulate. A person who does not need constant comfort becomes less afraid of discomfort. A person who is willing to suffer a little on purpose becomes harder to threaten with suffering. This is why discipline and freedom are tied together. The more you need from the world in order to remain stable, the less free you are. If you need perfect conditions, you are not free. If you need constant praise, you are not free. If you need comfort, entertainment, sugar, noise, attention, and convenience just to keep functioning, you are not free. You are dependent. And dependency always weakens authority over the self. The Stoic path is a path of reducing dependency. Not because joy is evil, not because pleasure is forbidden, but because anything you cannot go without has power over you. That is a hard truth. What controls you reveals itself by what you cannot calmly refuse. Can you refuse ease? Can you refuse impulse? Can you refuse immediate pleasure? Can you refuse emotional indulgence? Can you refuse the need to always be comfortable? Most people discover very quickly that they cannot, and that discovery is humbling. But it is also useful, because once you see where you are weak, you know where training must begin. This chapter is not asking you to become extreme. It is not asking you to hate comfort or reject everything pleasant in life. That would miss the point. The point is not to make life miserable. The point is to stop being mastered by whatever feels good. There is a difference. A disciplined person can enjoy comfort without becoming dependent on it. They can appreciate rest without worshipping laziness. They can enjoy pleasure without becoming its servant. That is balance. That is power. But power only comes after training. And training must be concrete. This is where many people fail. They love the philosophy, but they never turn it into practice. So ask yourself this: where is your softness strongest? Is it in your mornings? In your appetite? In your phone use? In your fear of silence? In your need for approval? In your inability to sit with boredom? In your habit of avoiding hard conversations? In your tendency to abandon effort when results come slowly? There is your training ground. Do not run from it. Go there. If your weakness is comfort in the body, train the body. If your weakness is comfort in the mind, train the mind. If your weakness is emotional indulgence, train restraint. If your weakness is distraction, train attention. If your weakness is avoidance, train confrontation. This is how self-mastery becomes real, not by admiring discipline from a distance, but by building a private relationship with difficulty. And here is something else people rarely understand. Voluntary hardship does not only make you stronger, it makes you grateful. A person who occasionally chooses less begins to appreciate more. A person who practices hunger respects food. A person who practices silence values speech. A person who walks values shelter. A person who does difficult things willingly stops taking comfort for granted. This is one of the hidden gifts of the Stoic path. When you are no longer addicted to ease, you begin to see life more clearly. You stop acting like comfort is your birthright. You stop treating inconvenience like an injustice. You stop expecting reality to bend around your preferences. And because of that, you suffer less. Not because life becomes easier, but because your standards of what you require from life become wiser. This is a deeper kind of peace. The peace of someone who can live simply. The peace of someone who can endure. The peace of someone who is not constantly negotiating with discomfort. The peace of someone who knows they can survive without the endless extras. That kind of peace cannot be bought. It has to be earned. Earned through repeated proof. Proof that you can bear cold. Proof that you can bear hunger. Proof that you can bear effort. Proof that you can bear silence. Proof that you can bear loneliness. Proof that you can bear being misunderstood. Proof that you can bear the long road without constant reward. Once you begin collecting this proof, something inside you becomes less fragile. You stop panicking so quickly. You stop dramatizing every obstacle. You stop needing life to feel easy in order to feel okay. And from there, a higher form of discipline becomes possible. Because now, you are not only fighting your impulses, you are outgrowing your addiction to comfort itself. That is a major turning point. Most people never reach it. They spend their whole lives arranging reality to protect themselves from discomfort. And because of that, they never discover their own depth. They never meet the stronger self hiding behind resistance. But you cannot meet that self in luxury. You meet that self in effort, in fatigue, in restraint, in cold mornings, in difficult choices, in boring repetitions, in the long stretch where nobody sees your progress, but you keep going anyway. That is where your harder self is waiting. And when you finally meet that version of yourself, something beautiful happens. You begin to respect yourself again. Not because you became perfect, not because life got easier, not because you finally impressed other people, but because you stopped running from difficulty. And the one who stops running from difficulty begins to look different even in silence. There is less panic in them, less neediness, less fragility, less theater, more steadiness, more clarity, more simplicity, more command. That is what voluntary hardship gives you. It kills softness before life has the chance to weaponize it against you. So the next time you are faced with a small choice between ease and effort, do not ask only what feels better. Ask what makes you stronger. Ask what reduces dependency. Ask what builds edge. Ask what teaches the body and mind that they are not in charge. Then choose that. Quietly, consistently, without drama. Because every time you choose the harder path on purpose, you are doing more than building discipline. You are reclaiming authority over your life. And once that authority begins to return, the world starts losing some of its power to weaken you. That is the purpose of this training. Not pain for its own sake, not harshness for appearance, not punishment in the name of virtue. Strength, useful strength, calm strength, private strength. The kind of strength that remains when pleasure disappears and life becomes demanding. That is what the Stoics were building, and that is what you must build too. Because the person who can endure without collapsing, who can do without complaining, who can choose difficulty without resentment, is already becoming dangerous to weakness. And that kind of person is no longer easy for the world to break. Chapter 3. The War for Your Attention. There is a reason so many people feel mentally exhausted even when they have done very little that matters. Their attention has been stolen all day long. Not once, not twice, but in fragments, minute by minute, impulse by impulse, notification by notification, thought by thought. And by the time the day ends, they feel drained, scattered, and strangely dissatisfied, even though they were busy from morning to night. This is one of the great crises of the modern age. People do not only lack discipline in their actions, they lack discipline in their attention. And attention is far more important than most people realize. Because your life is shaped by what you repeatedly notice. Your character is shaped by what you repeatedly dwell on. Your future is shaped by what you repeatedly give mental energy to. Show me what captures your attention every day, and I will show you the direction your life is moving. This is why the war for attention is not a small issue. It is not just a productivity problem. It is not just a harmless habit of checking your phone too much. It is not just a matter of being a little distracted. It is a battle over the command center of your soul. The Stoics understood that a human being becomes weak when the mind is unable to govern what it entertains. They knew that what you allow into your mind matters. They knew that thoughts are not harmless visitors if they are constantly welcomed, repeated, fed, and believed. In the modern world, there are entire systems designed to prevent you from remaining inwardly steady. Entire industries exist to fracture your focus, to keep you craving, to keep you reacting, to keep you stimulated, outraged, anxious, entertained, envious, and mentally restless. Because a distracted person is easier to control. A distracted person buys more easily, consumes more easily, compares more easily, panics more easily, obeys trends more easily, and most importantly, a distracted person has very little power left for self-examination. That is why distraction is so dangerous. It does not merely waste time. It weakens self-command. It trains you to become reactive. It trains you to obey novelty. It trains you to move toward whatever flashes, rings, vibrates, promises pleasure, or gives you a quick emotional hit. And after enough repetition, the mind begins to lose its taste for depth. Silence feels unbearable. Stillness feels empty. Reading feels slow. Thinking feels hard. A meaningful task feels less attractive than 10 shallow interruptions. This is how inner power erodes. Not through one dramatic event, but through the daily habit of allowing the mind to be broken into pieces. That is what distraction really does. It breaks your inner life into fragments. You begin one thing, then drift to another. You open the phone for one reason and forget why you picked it up. You start working, then remember something trivial. You try to rest, but cannot stop scrolling. You sit with a loved one, but half your attention is somewhere else. You hear yourself say things like, "I do not know where the day went." And that is not accidental. You are living in a world that profits from your inability to remain present. This is why attention must become a moral issue for you, not just a practical one. Because whatever you cannot control will eventually control you. If your attention can be hijacked by every notification, every trend, every headline, every irritation, every passing urge to check, then your inner world is no longer under your authority. And once authority is lost internally, it becomes very hard to build anything meaningful externally. Think about what real discipline actually requires. To do deep work, you need attention. To pray, reflect, or journal honestly, you need attention. To listen well, you need attention. To stay calm in conflict, you need attention. To resist temptation, you need attention. To notice your own thoughts before they become actions, you need attention. Attention is not one discipline among many. It is the doorway to nearly all of them. That is why the Stoic must learn to guard it like a fortress. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about returning to himself, returning to reason, returning to the inner place that noise cannot command. That return is harder now than it was in Rome, because now the noise travels in your pocket. It waits on your desk. It sits beside your bed. It follows you into the bathroom, into your meals, into your work, into your relationships, and even into the few moments that were once reserved for solitude. This means the modern person is not only fighting temptation in the traditional sense. He is fighting invasion. Invasion of thought, invasion of mood, invasion of comparison, invasion of urgency, invasion of triviality. And if he does not defend the gate, he will eventually become a host for other people's agendas. That is what many people are without realizing it. They think they are living freely, but their mind is being pulled all day by forces they did not choose. They wake up and reach for a device before they have reached for themselves. They absorb opinions before they have established their own. They react before they reflect. They consume before they create. They fill their mind before they have asked what deserves to be there. Then they wonder why they feel inwardly weak. But weakness grows wherever the gate is left open. Imagine a city with no guards, no walls, and no standards for who may enter. Every stranger walks in. Every voice gets heard. Every merchant, every criminal, every manipulator, every fool has access. How long would that city remain orderly? Your mind is no different. If you allow everything in, chaos is not a surprise. It is the natural result. This is why discipline of attention begins with a simple but brutal question. What have you been allowing into your mind? Not just today, not just this week. Repeatedly. What do you watch? What do you read? What do you replay? Whose voices do you let live in your head? What kind of emotional atmosphere are you feeding yourself every day? Because the mind becomes shaped by what it repeatedly consumes. If you feed it outrage, it becomes agitated. If you feed it envy, it becomes restless. If you feed it pleasure without effort, it becomes weak. If you feed it endless novelty, it becomes impatient. If you feed it noise, it forgets how to hear truth. A disciplined person understands this. They are careful not only about what they do with their body, but about what enters through the eyes and ears. They treat attention like land, sacred land, limited land, land where not everything deserves to be built. And because of that, they become selective. They do not click everything. They do not respond to everything. They do not argue with every fool. They do not follow every controversy. They do not let every trend rent space in their mind. This is one of the deepest forms of modern discipline. To stay mentally unhooked in a world built to hook you, that takes strength. Because distraction is not always ugly. Sometimes it appears as pleasure, sometimes as curiosity, sometimes as the feeling that you are staying informed, sometimes as harmless entertainment, sometimes as just a little break. But the real question is never only what it is. The real question is what it is doing to you. Is it sharpening your mind or scattering it? Is it making you calmer or more reactive? Is it building clarity or stealing it? Is it helping you return to yourself or pulling you further away? You must learn to ask these questions. Otherwise, the cost of your habits will remain invisible until the damage is deep. And the damage is often not obvious at first. It appears in subtle ways. You struggle to read a few pages without checking something. You feel irritation when there is nothing stimulating you. You avoid difficult tasks because your mind now prefers easy dopamine. You cannot sit quietly without reaching for input. You feel mentally crowded even when no one is around. You want to think clearly, but your thoughts feel foggy and overused. This is not always burnout. Sometimes it is overstimulation disguised as normal life. That is why a Stoic approach to attention is so needed now. The Stoic does not merely ask, "What am I doing?" He asks, "What is this doing to my soul?" That is a higher question, because many things that are socially normal are spiritually corrosive. Constant comparison is normal. Mental clutter is normal. Scroll addiction is normal. Being reachable every second is normal. Having no silence is normal. But normal does not mean wise. A person can live in a deeply distracted culture and still refuse to become inwardly scattered. That refusal is one of the purest acts of rebellion. To close the app, to leave the phone in another room, to think before reacting, to work without switching tasks, to go for a walk without stimulation, to sit in silence and let the mind settle, to read slowly, to speak less, to choose depth over noise. These actions seem small, but they are acts of resistance against a system that wants you fragmented. And fragmentation has consequences. A fragmented mind cannot build a great life. It cannot sustain effort. It cannot endure boredom. It cannot listen deeply. It cannot create from the center of itself. It cannot stay present in suffering. It cannot stay humble in success. It cannot maintain strong relationships because it is always half elsewhere. This is why reclaiming attention is not optional for someone who wants self-mastery. It is foundational. You cannot build an inner citadel with a revolving door. You cannot claim to value peace while feeding your mind with chaos all day. You cannot say you want to be disciplined while making yourself available to endless interruption. You cannot say you want depth while practicing shallowness every hour. At some point, you must choose. Will your attention be ruled by your values or by whatever is designed to provoke you next? That is the question of this chapter. And the answer is revealed by your habits, not by what you admire, by what you repeat. Do you begin the day by entering your own mind or by entering the digital crowd? Do you give your best hours to your priorities or to random stimulation? Do you protect silence or avoid it? Do you consume more than you create? Do you finish what you start, or does your mind keep running toward the next little hit of novelty? There is no need to judge yourself theatrically here. Only tell the truth. Because once again, honesty is where the path begins. Maybe you have become addicted to mental noise. Maybe your attention span has been weakened by years of interruption. Maybe you have trained yourself to need stimulation every few minutes. Maybe you are no longer sure what your own mind sounds like without outside input. If that is true, then do not despair. But do not lie either, because this can be trained. Attention can be rebuilt. Focus can be restored. The mind can be calmed. The gate can be guarded again. But it will require you to do something many people are unwilling to do. Remove what is overstimulating you. Reduce what is fragmenting you. Refuse what is training you to be shallow. That will feel uncomfortable at first. Of course it will. A mind trained on constant stimulation interprets stillness as deprivation. But that is only because it has forgotten what stillness is for. Stillness is where you hear what your life is actually becoming. Stillness is where your thoughts stop performing and start revealing. Stillness is where motives become clearer. Stillness is where anxiety loses some of its fuel. Stillness is where your inner world begins to gather itself again. This is why silence is not empty. Silence is medicinal, and the disciplined person learns not to fear it. He learns to sit with himself long enough to notice what rules him. He learns to catch impulses before they become behaviors. He learns to observe boredom without instantly trying to kill it. He learns to let thoughts rise and pass without obeying each one. This is real progress, not merely being busy, not merely staying occupied, but becoming less easy to hijack. That is power. The power to remain in one task. The power to finish what matters. The power to hear a notification and ignore it. The power to let outrage pass without joining it. The power to keep your mind pointed toward what is essential while the world keeps throwing trivial things in your direction. That is the kind of power the Stoics admired. Inner command. And inner command requires subtraction, less noise, less reaction, less useless input, less checking, less fragmentation, less permission for trivial things to enter sacred mental space. When you begin subtracting properly, something surprising happens. Life does not become poorer. It becomes clearer. You notice more, think more deeply, feel less mentally crowded, work with more continuity, speak with more purpose, listen with more care, rest more fully, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to feel present again. That word matters. Present. Because many people are physically alive but mentally absent. Always elsewhere. Always anticipating. Always checking. Always leaving the moment for something more stimulating. But discipline brings you back. Back to the work in front of you. Back to the person in front of you. Back to the thought you need to think honestly. Back to the feeling you need to face. Back to the silence you need to stop fearing. Back to the life you keep missing while your attention is wandering. This chapter is not merely about avoiding distraction. It is about returning to reality. Reality is usually quieter than distraction, slower than distraction, less exciting than distraction, but infinitely more valuable. Because reality is where your life is actually happening. Not on the feed, not in the endless reaction cycle, not in the next burst of stimulation. Here, now, in the task, in the breath, in the choice, in the moment where you either remain with yourself or abandon yourself again. That is why attention is sacred. Whatever has your attention is, in a very real sense, shaping your life. So be ruthless here. Not cold, not obsessive, ruthless. Because time is limited, and attention is even more limited than time. You may live many years, but if your attention is constantly stolen, you will not truly inhabit those years. You will merely pass through them in fragments. Do not let that happen. Do not hand over your mind so cheaply. Train yourself to pause before consuming. Train yourself to ask whether this is necessary. Train yourself to notice when curiosity is actually avoidance. Train yourself to sit through the itch, to check, refresh, react, and escape. Train yourself to stay. Stay with the work. Stay with the silence. Stay with the conversation. Stay with the discomfort of not being stimulated. Stay long enough for your own mind to become your home again. Because once your attention returns to you, many other things return with it. Clarity returns. Patience returns. Depth returns. Self-respect returns. And discipline stops feeling like a performance. It becomes your nature. The world will continue trying to scatter you. That will not stop. But not every invitation deserves a response. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every feeling deserves action. Not every noise deserves entry. Guard the gate. Because the person who can govern attention is already becoming difficult to manipulate, difficult to distract, and difficult to weaken. And that kind of person is beginning to remember what freedom feels like. Chapter 4. The space between impulse and action. Most people think they lose control in a single second. They say, "I just snapped. I just could not help it. I just gave in." But that is almost never true. What really happened is this: an impulse appeared, and because the mind was untrained, the impulse was treated like a command. That is the real problem. Not that anger appears, not that fear rises, not that temptation speaks, not that laziness whispers. All of that is part of being human. The danger begins when every feeling is obeyed as if it were truth. This is why so many people live in quiet slavery. A bad mood becomes a bad day. A bad day becomes a bad decision. A bad decision becomes a bad pattern. And a bad pattern becomes a damaged life. All because the person never learned one of the most important skills a human being can learn: how to create space between what he feels and what he does. That space is everything. Inside that space lives freedom. Inside that space lives dignity. Inside that space lives the difference between a reactive life and a governed one. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that life constantly sends impressions into the mind: an insult, a temptation, a frustration, a fear, a craving, a disappointment. And the first reaction usually arrives fast. Strike back, defend yourself, quit, escape, complain, indulge, say it, do it, prove something, protect your ego. But the Stoics warned against giving immediate loyalty to the first movement of the mind. Because the first movement is not always wise, it is only the first wave. And if you build your whole life around first waves, you will become emotionally unstable, easy to provoke, easy to tempt, easy to manipulate, easy to break. That is not strength. Strength is not feeling nothing. Strength is feeling deeply and still remaining under command. That is what emotional discipline really is. Not becoming cold. Not pretending pain does not hurt. Not acting like betrayal does not sting. Not denying that anger, fear, sadness, and desire all exist. The Stoic feels all of this, but he does not bow to it. He understands that a feeling may arrive without deserving authority. That is maturity. Many people today confuse authenticity with obedience to emotion. If they feel angry, they speak. If they feel tempted, they indulge. If they feel irritated, they unload it onto others. If they feel tired, they abandon duty. If they feel fear, they retreat. They call this honesty. But often it is not honesty. It is a life ruled by mood. Real honesty sounds different. I feel anger, but I do not have to become anger. I feel fear, but fear does not get to decide my character. I feel the urge to quit, but the urge does not own the day. I feel temptation, but temptation is not the ruler of my life. That is a very different way of living, and it is the beginning of real power. Because the person who can hold an emotion without immediately acting on it becomes difficult to provoke and difficult to control. This matters in every area of life. Someone criticizes you. Do you react instantly, or do you pause? A craving rises. Do you obey it instantly, or do you observe it? A hard conversation appears. Do you run, or do you remain? A wound in your ego gets touched. Do you defend yourself emotionally, or do you ask what is actually true? These moments look small, but they decide the quality of your character. Most damage in life does not come from a lack of intelligence. It comes from a lack of pause, words said in anger, choices made in fear, promises broken for relief, relationships damaged by pride, work abandoned because discomfort felt too strong. That is why the pause is sacred. A pause has saved more lives than most dramatic actions ever have. 1 breath before speaking, 1 minute before replying, 1 walk before deciding, 1 night before sending the message, 1 silent moment before saying the thing you cannot take back. These pauses do not look impressive, but they are the hidden structure of self-mastery. Because in the pause, reason has time to return, and reason asks better questions. What exactly am I feeling? What is this emotion trying to make me do? If I obey it now, what will it cost me later? Does this serve my character or only my ego? What response would my better self respect tomorrow? These questions create distance, and distance reduces danger. This is especially true with anger. Anger is one of the most persuasive emotions because it feels powerful. It makes you feel sharp, righteous, and alive. It tells you that immediate expression is strength. But undisciplined anger is usually not strength. It is loss of command disguised as power. A person who cannot control anger is not strong. He is combustible. And combustible people harm everything around them. They wound people they love. They turn small problems into large ones. They speak from heat instead of truth. They mistake intensity for wisdom. The disciplined person treats anger differently. He does not instantly trust it. He inspects it. Is this principle or just wounded pride? Is this worth speaking on, or am I only trying to win? Will speaking now improve this or worsen it? Would silence for a moment make me clearer? Very often, what looks like righteous anger is injured ego wearing armor. And once you see that, you stop glorifying every emotional flame. The same is true of fear. Fear often speaks with certainty. Do not begin. Do not risk. Do not confront. Do not continue. Do not speak. Do not fail in public. But fear is not always telling the truth. Often it is just trying to keep you comfortable. If you obey fear too often, your life becomes smaller and smaller. You start avoiding discomfort, then avoiding challenge, then avoiding growth. Soon you are not living carefully. You are living defensively. This is why courage matters. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action guided by principle while fear is still present. And again, that depends on space. Can you feel fear without letting it sit on the throne? Can you feel doubt without letting doubt cancel your duty? Can you move forward while the body is still uncertain? That is how courage is built. Not by waiting for fear to disappear, but by proving repeatedly that fear does not get the final word. This is also true with desire. Desire says, now, now, now. Eat it, check it, buy it, say it, take it, escape into it. Desire survives through urgency. That is why delay weakens it. If you sit with the urge instead of obeying it, something important happens. You discover that you are larger than the craving. You discover that not every desire deserves fulfillment. You discover that the body can ask for something without becoming the ruler. That is freedom. Most people do not know this kind of freedom. They think freedom means doing what they feel like doing. But that is not freedom. That is appetite with no master. Real freedom is being able to feel an urge and remain still, to feel a craving and not kneel, to feel emotion and still choose what is right. That is rare. And because it is rare, it is powerful. The world is full of people who can be baited, triggered, tempted, distracted, seduced, and emotionally controlled. Why? Because they do not guard the space between impulse and action. Their inner gates are open. Everything gets in. Everything gets a reaction. Everything becomes personal. Everything becomes urgent. That is a terrible way to live. Your peace becomes dependent on the behavior of other people. Your behavior becomes dependent on the mood of the moment. Your character becomes unstable because it changes with emotional weather. The Stoic refuses this. He says, I may not control what arrives in me, but I can train what leaves me. I may not control the first sting, but I can govern the second movement. I may not control the event, but I can decide whether I multiply the damage. That is real self-command, and it must be practiced. Not admired from a distance, practiced. When you want to interrupt, pause. When you want to defend your ego, pause. When you want to send the message, pause. When you want to quit because the work feels heavy, pause. When you want to numb yourself because you feel uncomfortable, pause. The pause is where the higher self enters. Without it, the lower self rules by speed. With it, reason returns and asks, what is required here? That question is better than almost any emotional question. Not what do I feel like doing? Not what would satisfy me right now? What is required? Sometimes what is required is silence. Sometimes restraint. Sometimes courage. Sometimes apology, sometimes firmness, sometimes patience, sometimes endurance. But whatever it is, it usually does not come from blind reaction. It comes from deliberate choice. And deliberate choice is the heart of discipline. The more you practice this, the more the inner space grows. At first, you may only catch yourself after the reaction, then during it, then just before it. Eventually, you begin to see the impulse almost as it arrives, and that changes everything. You become less easy to provoke, less easy to seduce, less easy to distract, less likely to say what should not be said, less likely to turn a passing feeling into a lasting consequence. You start becoming slower in the best possible way. Not lazy, not dull, deliberate. Your words pass through judgment. Your actions pass through principle. Your emotions still move through you, but they no longer own the whole house. This also changes your relationships. A disciplined parent passes less chaos to the child. A disciplined partner brings less drama into love. A disciplined friend becomes more trustworthy. A disciplined leader becomes less dangerous with power. A disciplined person lowers the amount of unnecessary suffering they spread into the world. That is one of the beautiful things about self-command. It does not only protect you. It protects others from the worst, most ungoverned parts of you. And that makes discipline an act of service, not just self-improvement. So the next time emotion surges, remember this: you do not need to obey the first voice. You do not need to become the first feeling. You do not need to let the first wave decide the whole direction of the day. Pause. Breathe once. Look again. Question the urge. Refuse the urgency. Let the heat cool before you act. Because every time you create space between impulse and action, you strengthen the higher self. And every time you strengthen the higher self, your life becomes less reactive, less chaotic, and more worthy of your own respect. That is the work of this chapter. Not destroying emotion, governing it. Not becoming less human, becoming more fully in command of what a human being can be. And the person who learns that skill is no longer merely reacting to life. He is beginning at last to rule himself. Chapter 5. The obstacle is the training. Most people say they want discipline, but what they really want is a clear road. They want progress without resistance, growth without delay, strength without pain, consistency without boredom, calm without provocation. But that is not how character is built. Character is not built when everything goes your way. It is built when something blocks the way and you still remain under command. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because most people still see obstacles as interruptions, as proof that something is wrong, as reasons to become discouraged, irritated, or defeated. The Stoic sees the same moment differently. The obstacle is not just in the path. The obstacle is the path. That means difficulty is not only testing you, it is shaping you. The delay is shaping you. The rejection is shaping you. The failure is shaping you. The unfairness is shaping you. The boredom is shaping you. The pressure is shaping you. The real question is not whether obstacles will come. They will. The real question is, what will they make of you? Will they make you bitter, restless, fragile, reactive, self-pitying? Or will they make you steadier, more patient, more honest, more resilient, more disciplined? That depends on how you interpret them. This is why Stoicism is so powerful. It teaches you not only how to endure hardship, but how to use it. Most people waste hardship. Something difficult happens, and instead of becoming wiser, they become more dramatic. Instead of becoming stronger, they become more resentful. Instead of becoming deeper, they become more reactive. The pain passes through them, but it leaves behind no wisdom, only damage. The Stoic refuses to waste pain like that. If difficulty must come, then let it teach me. If delay must come, then let it train patience. If failure must come, then let it expose what still needs work. If unfairness must come, then let it train justice without poisoning my character. That is a very different way to live. Now life is no longer just something happening to you. It becomes material. Material for self-mastery. Material for humility. Material for endurance. Material for virtue. This does not mean pretending hardship feels good. It does not mean smiling at every wound. It does not mean calling pain pleasant. It means refusing to let pain remain meaningless. That is the difference. Most people ask, why is this happening to me? The Stoic asks, what is this training in me? That question restores power. Because once you ask that, you stop standing helplessly in front of reality. You begin working with it. A failed plan becomes training in flexibility. A rude person becomes training in restraint. A season of uncertainty becomes training in steadiness. A slow result becomes training in patience. A disappointment becomes training in emotional maturity. Now the obstacle has purpose. And once difficulty has purpose, it becomes harder for it to destroy you. This is why discipline is never proven on easy days. Easy days prove very little. Almost anyone can feel calm when nothing is provoking them. Almost anyone can feel focused when nothing is distracting them. Almost anyone can feel strong when nothing is heavy. But the obstacle reveals the truth. It shows you where you are still weak. That is valuable, because you cannot strengthen what you refuse to see. When a setback makes you collapse, something has been revealed. When criticism controls your whole mood, something has been revealed. When a delay makes you want to quit, something has been revealed. When discomfort turns into complaint, something has been revealed. This is not bad news. It is useful news. The obstacle is showing you where your training must continue. That is why the Stoic does not merely try to avoid challenge. He learns from it. He lets difficulty expose him without humiliating him. He lets pressure teach him without defining him. He lets setbacks correct him without turning them into identity. This is where amor fati becomes real, love of fate. Not because every event is pleasant, but because every event can become fuel for character. If this has happened, then let me use it. If this burden is mine, let me carry it well. If this road is in front of me, let me walk it with dignity. That is strength. Not because it makes pain disappear, but because it stops pain from becoming useless. A lot of suffering becomes worse because people fight reality after reality has already arrived. First, the event hurts. Then the mind begins its rebellion. This should not be happening. Why now? Why me? This ruins everything. Nothing ever works. Life is against me. These thoughts multiply suffering. They do not solve the problem. They only drain strength. The disciplined person does something else. He asks, this is here. Now, what is required? That question is a turning point, because it moves the mind away from self-pity and back toward duty. What is required now? Patience, adjustment, courage, silence, persistence, humility, starting over. Whatever it is, that becomes the work. And this is how obstacles stop being dead ends. They become assignments. That is why disciplined people often look calmer under pressure. It is not because their lives are easier. It is because they stopped expecting life to be easy before they would act with strength. They understand that difficulty is not a violation of life. Difficulty is part of life. So they do not waste energy being shocked by it. They use that energy to meet it well. This does not make them passive. It makes them effective. A passive person says, this is hard, so I am done. A reactive person says, this is unfair, so I will complain. A disciplined person says, this is hard, so I must become harder in the right way. That phrase matters. Harder in the right way. because hardship can harden people badly too. It can make them bitter, cruel, suspicious, emotionally closed, constantly resentful. That is not Stoic strength. Stoic strength is not becoming colder. It is becoming deeper, still human, still just, still calm, still capable of kindness, but less fragile, less dramatic, less dependent on easy conditions. That kind of strength is rare, and it is built in moments when life does not cooperate. You work hard and no one notices. What now? You begin improving and then fall back. What now? You trust someone and they disappoint you. What now? You make a plan and circumstances change everything. What now? These are not side moments. These are the moments that decide whether your philosophy is real. Because anyone can sound wise when life is comfortable. The obstacle is the examiner. It asks, do you really believe what you say you believe? Can you continue when progress is slow? Can you stay decent when others are not? Can you remain disciplined when the reward is delayed? Can you suffer without becoming smaller inside? These are serious questions, and life asks them often. That is why one of the most important disciplines is learning to return. You will not meet every obstacle perfectly. You will get tired. You will lose composure sometimes. You will get discouraged. You will stumble. The issue is not perfection. The issue is return. Do you return quickly, or do you turn one hard moment into a whole season of drift? The disciplined person returns. He misses a day. He returns. He gets distracted. He returns. He fails. He learns, steadies himself, and returns. That ability matters more than people realize, because many lives are not ruined by a single obstacle. They are ruined by the interpretation of the obstacle. A person stumbles once and decides he is inconsistent. He struggles for a season and decides he is not built for this. He hits resistance and decides the whole path must be wrong. That is how people abandon growth. Not because the obstacle destroyed them, because they let the obstacle define them. The Stoic refuses that. He says, this obstacle may slow me, test me, humble me, or correct me, but it does not get to tell me who I am. That is dignity. And that dignity creates a quiet confidence. Not the confidence that life will always go well. A better kind. The confidence that whatever comes, you can meet it without losing yourself. That is one of the greatest strengths a human being can develop. Not control over outcomes, control over response. So the next time the path becomes difficult, do not rush to ask how to remove the obstacle. First ask what it is here to train. Maybe it is training patience, maybe courage, maybe humility, maybe endurance, maybe self-command. Then meet it from there. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but steadily. Because every obstacle you meet well adds something to you. A little more gravity, a little more patience, a little more self-trust, a little more evidence that you are not a slave to circumstances. And that evidence matters. Over time, it becomes part of your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs smooth conditions to function. You become someone who can remain upright under weight. That is what the obstacle can give you. Not comfort, not ease. Something better. Character. So stop asking for a lighter path. Ask for stronger shoulders. Stop asking why this is happening. Ask what it can build in you. Stop waiting for difficulty to leave before you begin growing. The obstacle is part of the growth. Use it well. And if you do, what once looked like resistance will become one of the very things that made you unshakable. Chapter 6. Memento Mori and the Discipline of Urgency. Most people live as if they have time. They know, in theory, that life is short. They know death will come. They have heard it since childhood. They have seen people age. They have watched years disappear. And still, they move through their days as if tomorrow belongs to them. That is one of the great illusions of human life. We say time is precious, but we spend it carelessly. We say life is short, but we postpone what matters. We say tomorrow is not promised, but we structure our habits around the fantasy that tomorrow will always arrive. This is why the Stoics kept death close, not to become dark, not to become hopeless, not to become obsessed with endings, but to become clear. Memento Mori. Remember that you will die. To a shallow mind, that sounds depressing. To a serious mind, it sounds like truth. And truth has a way of cutting through nonsense. Death is the great clarifier. It exposes what matters. It strips away the trivial. It humiliates procrastination. It makes many of our excuses look weak and childish. When you remember that your time is limited, a strange thing happens. A lot of what once felt important starts losing its grip. That pointless argument, that delay, that fear of looking foolish, that endless waiting for the perfect time, that habit of saying, "I will begin later." All of it begins to look smaller, because death reduces illusion. It reminds you that life is not an endless hallway. It is a brief window, and the window is already open. That is the part most people avoid. Your life is not waiting to begin. It is already happening. The event is in progress. Every morning you wake up, you are not standing outside your life preparing to enter it. You are already spending it. And that should change the way you live. The Stoics did not reflect on death because they hated life. They reflected on death because they wanted to stop wasting it. That is a crucial difference. A person who forgets death becomes casual with time. He delays what matters. He gives his best hours to weak habits. He treats his days as if they were replaceable. He assumes there will always be another chance to begin, another season to change, another moment to become the person he already knows he should become. But that assumption is dangerous, because later is one of the most expensive words in the human language. Lives are quietly destroyed by later. Not all at once, not dramatically. One postponed conversation, one delayed act of courage, one more month of drift, one more year of excuses, one more season of waiting for the right mood. And while the person waits, life keeps moving. The body changes, energy changes, people leave, opportunities close. The soul becomes more practiced in avoidance. This is how years disappear, not only through tragedy, through postponement. That is why Memento Mori is not a dark meditation. It is an anti-delusion practice. It forces you to see the day for what it is, a piece of a finite life. Not a rehearsal, not a draft, not a throwaway afternoon in an endless supply of afternoons. A real day, a day that will never return, a day taken from your total number, whether you use it well or not. Once you feel that, discipline becomes easier in a certain sense. Not emotionally easier, morally clearer. Because when time becomes real, wasted time starts to feel painful. It becomes harder to justify endless distraction, harder to protect laziness, harder to postpone the work you know matters, harder to treat your own potential as optional. This is the discipline of urgency, not panic, not frantic speed, not trying to do everything at once. Urgency, calm, clean urgency. The understanding that because life is short, you must stop living as if there is no cost to delay. This matters because many people are not actually confused about what to do. They already know. They know the habit that is weakening them. They know the conversation they need to have. They know the standard they keep lowering. They know the work they keep avoiding. They know the discipline they keep postponing. The problem is rarely ignorance. The problem is that they think they still have endless time to continue betraying what they know. Memento mori interrupts that fantasy. It asks, how long do you think you can keep playing with your life before your life stops waiting? That is a hard question, but it is a good one, because it wakes people up. It forces them to ask, if I were to die sooner than I expect, would I be proud of how I am living now? Would I keep giving so much energy to trivial people and trivial problems? Would I keep handing my strongest hours to distraction? Would I keep postponing discipline, honesty, courage, or change? When you ask those questions sincerely, your priorities begin to reorganize. You stop wanting to do everything. You start wanting to do what matters. That is wisdom. A person who remembers death does not necessarily become faster. He becomes clearer. He wastes less emotion on nonsense. He becomes less interested in ego games, less interested in proving himself to unstable people, less interested in carrying resentments that poison the little time he has. Because once life becomes precious, bitterness becomes expensive. So does vanity. So does gossip. So does endless comparison. So does prolonged self-pity. You begin asking a different question. Is this worthy of a mortal life? That is one of the best questions a person can ask. Is this habit worthy of your life? Is this distraction worthy of your life? Is this resentment worthy of your life? Is this fear worthy of your life? Is this delay worthy of your life? Many things lose their charm when measured against mortality. This is one reason the Stoics seemed severe, not because they were cold, because they understood the cost of waste. To waste money is one thing, to waste years is another. A wasted life is often not loud, it is often comfortable. A person can live in routine, entertainment, low-level distraction, emotional repetition and postponement for years, and from the outside it may all look normal. But deep down, something knows. Something knows when a life is being lived beneath its own calling. That quiet inner disappointment is one of the saddest forms of suffering. Memento mori speaks directly to that suffering. It says, wake up before the ending wakes you up for you. That is why remembering death can actually make you more grateful. You start appreciating ordinary things more deeply. A conversation matters more. A morning matters more. The people you love matter more. Your health matters more. The chance to act with courage matters more. You stop assuming you will always have another chance. That gives discipline a different kind of depth. Discipline is no longer just about productivity. It is about reverence. Reverence for life. Reverence for time. Reverence for the fact that you were given a brief existence, and how you spend it is the truest statement of what you value. You honor life by how you use it. That is why discipline and mortality belong together. If you forget death, you become careless. If you remember death, you become deliberate. Not nervous, not obsessive, deliberate. You stop saying someday. You start acting inside the day in front of you. That is where the Stoic lives. Not in fantasy, not in endless future planning, not in regret over what is gone. Here, in the present hour, in the duty at hand, in the conversation that needs truth, in the task that needs effort, in the habit that needs correction, in the courage that needs action now, not later. This does not mean you become harsh with yourself in a foolish way. It means you stop letting yourself hide behind delay, because one day there will be no more beginnings left. That is the sobering truth. There will be a last morning, a last conversation, a last season of strength, a last chance to do certain things, and you do not know when those last times are happening. That should not terrify you. It should sharpen you. It should make you more honest, more awake, more unwilling to hand your life to what is beneath you. So the next time you feel the urge to postpone the hard thing again, remember, you are not moving toward endless tomorrows. You are moving toward an ending. Let that simplify you. Let that steady you. Let that burn away excuses. Then begin. Begin the work. Begin the apology. Begin the habit. Begin the return. Begin the discipline. Begin the life you keep promising yourself you will live later, because later is shrinking. And the wise person remembers that before it is too late. Chapter 7. Discipline in service of others. There is a form of discipline that is still incomplete. It is the kind that makes you stronger for yourself, but not yet useful to anyone else. Many people begin the path of self-mastery because they are tired of their own weakness. They want more focus, more calm, more control, more dignity. That is a good beginning, but it is not the highest form. Because if discipline ends with the self, it can quietly become vanity, a polished ego, a private pride, a lonely strength that looks impressive but has not yet become wisdom. The Stoics asked for something greater. They asked a person not only to govern himself, but to become beneficial, to become someone whose discipline improves life around him, someone whose steadiness becomes a source of order, someone whose self-command reduces the amount of chaos he spreads into the world. That is where Stoicism becomes noble, not when it makes you colder, not when it makes you emotionally distant in the wrong way, not when it makes you proud of how much you can endure, but when it makes you more reliable, more just, more patient, more honest, more useful. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that human beings were born for each other. That line matters because it means your inner order is not only for your own private comfort. Your discipline is also for your duties, for your family, for your friends, for your work, for the people whose lives are touched by your moods, your words, your choices, and your level of self-command. This is why discipline has a moral weight. When you govern your anger, other people suffer less from your chaos. When you govern your speech, other people are safer with your words. When you govern your appetites, you become more trustworthy. When you govern your laziness, you stop making others carry what is yours to carry. When you govern your fear, you become capable of doing what is right, even when it is difficult. This shows up in ordinary life. A disciplined parent does not pour every frustration into the home. A disciplined spouse does not treat mood as permission to wound. A disciplined friend does not disappear when things become inconvenient. A disciplined worker does not need constant supervision to do what should be done. A disciplined leader does not abuse power when no one is watching. This is what makes discipline beautiful. It becomes invisible protection for other people. They may never know how much irritation you swallowed before speaking gently. They may never know how much temptation you resisted in order to remain faithful. They may never know how much effort it took for you to keep showing up while tired, disappointed, or emotionally heavy. But they live inside the consequences of your discipline, and that matters. One of the clearest signs of maturity is when a person stops asking only, "How can I improve my life?" and begins asking, "How can I become a steadier presence in the lives of others?" That question changes the soul, because now discipline is not just about achievement. It becomes stewardship. You begin to see your time, your speech, your emotions, your energy, and your influence as things that must be governed responsibly. This is especially true in speech. Very few people understand how much harm enters the world through an undisciplined tongue. A lie, a careless promise, a bitter tone, a cruel sentence spoken in anger, a private truth exposed for entertainment, a sharp word that lives for years in another person's memory. Words are not small. They build trust or destroy it. They heal or poison. They clarify or confuse. That is why speech requires discipline. The Stoics respected brevity. They respected silence. They understood that not every thought deserves expression, and not every emotion deserves a microphone. That is wisdom. Many people think honesty means saying exactly what they feel, but often that is not honesty. It is emotional leakage. Discipline asks better questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it the right time? Will this help? Or am I only unloading myself onto someone else? Those questions protect relationships. They protect dignity. They protect the soul from becoming careless and vulgar. This does not mean cowardice. Sometimes discipline requires confrontation. Sometimes it requires a boundary. Sometimes it requires hard truth. But even then, the disciplined person tries to speak from principle, not from emotional spill. That distinction matters, because principle can be trusted. Spillage cannot. The same is true with justice. Justice is one of the hardest disciplines because it asks you to rise above self-interest. It asks you to give people what is due, not what flatters your ego. It asks you to remain fair even when unfairness would benefit you. That is difficult. It is easy to praise justice in public. It is harder to practice it when your pride, your resentment, or your advantage are involved. But that is exactly why it is a discipline. A just person notices selfishness and resists it, notices bias and corrects it, notices the desire to humiliate or punish and places it under command. That kind of person becomes safe to be around. And safety is one of the great gifts of disciplined character. Not comfort in the weak sense, but the safety of knowing this person will not casually betray, explode, manipulate, deceive, or abandon duty whenever it becomes emotionally inconvenient. The world needs more of that. It does not need more dramatic people, more reactive people, more talented people with no character, more confident people with no restraint. It needs people whose strength can be trusted. And trusted strength is built through disciplined character. This is also tested in how you deal with difficult people. It is easy to be calm around calm people, The real test is what happens when you meet rudeness, selfishness, arrogance, dishonesty, ingratitude, and pettiness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he would meet such people. Not because he was cynical, because he was realistic. He knew that human beings are often ruled by ignorance, ego, appetite, and fear. So what then? The undisciplined mind becomes offended all day. The disciplined mind says, "This is part of life among human beings. Now how can I remain just without becoming poisoned?" That is a higher standard. This does not mean accepting abuse. It does not mean refusing to leave unhealthy situations. It does not mean never confronting what is wrong. It means refusing to let the faults of others become permission for the collapse of your own standards. A rude person is rude to you. Will you now become rude? A selfish person disappoints you. Will you now become selfish in return? A dishonest person betrays you. Will you now let bitterness destroy your own integrity? The Stoic answer is no, because your character is still yours to govern. Because another person's wrongdoing does not become good when copied. Because discipline means your values do not need perfect conditions in order to survive. This is what makes a person useful. Useful in families, useful in friendship, useful in leadership, useful in conflict, useful in hard moments when everyone else is losing proportion. And this usefulness is often quiet. It is the person who listens before speaking, the person who does what they said they would do, the person who does not inflame conflict just to feel powerful, the person whose presence lowers panic instead of spreading it. That is what disciplined character can become, a center of gravity, someone who can be leaned on without dragging others into chaos. And yes, this requires sacrifice. To become such a person, you often have to absorb discomfort privately so that you do not distribute it publicly. You have to hold your tongue when ego wants applause. Keep your word when mood wants escape. Remain fair when pride wants revenge. Keep serving when no one is thanking you. This is demanding work, but it is worthy work, because it is the work of becoming fit to live well among others. One of the clearest signs that your discipline is maturing is this: other people begin to benefit from it. Your family gets less of your chaos. Your work gets more of your reliability. Your friends get more of your honesty. Your community gets more of your steadiness. Your loved ones get more of your presence. That is the higher purpose of self-command, not just self-improvement. Service. Chapter 8. The Lifelong Climb. By now, one truth should be clear. Discipline is not an event. It is not one perfect morning, not one burst of motivation, not one season of strength that solves the problem forever. Discipline is a relationship between you and your impulses, between you and your duties, between you and discomfort, between you and truth, between you and the person you are either becoming by design or becoming by default. That is why the path never really ends. There is no final summit where temptation disappears, ego dies completely, distraction stops calling, and comfort loses all power. That is fantasy. The real path is quieter than that. It is the daily climb, the repeated return, the small correction, the refusal to let yesterday's discipline become today's excuse to drift. This is one of the most humbling parts of the Stoic path. Yesterday does not count today. You may have been focused yesterday, calm yesterday, courageous yesterday, restrained yesterday. But when this new day arrives, the work begins again. For some people that sounds exhausting. For the disciplined person, it becomes freeing. Because if the work is daily, then failure is never final. If the work is daily, then you do not need perfection in order to continue. Every morning offers a return. Every hour offers a correction. Every moment offers a chance to choose the higher self again. This is why the Stoic path does not produce perfect people. It produces returning people, people who know how to come back. Back to principle after distraction, back to restraint after anger, back to effort after laziness, back to honesty after self-deception, back to duty after drift. That ability matters more than dramatic intensity. Many people know how to begin. Very few know how to continue. They can start the routine, start the discipline, start the promises, start the transformation. But when the novelty fades, when the excitement cools, when the results are slow, when nobody is watching, they lose heart. That is where the real test begins. Can you keep going when it is no longer exciting? Can you keep choosing what is right when nobody is praising you? Can you keep your word when the only witness is your own conscience? That is where character becomes real. Because real character does not depend on emotional weather. It does not depend on applause. It does not depend on novelty. It depends on devotion. A quiet devotion to becoming someone your own soul can respect. This is why discipline must move beyond motivation. Motivation rises and falls. It depends on mood, energy, sleep, praise, and circumstances. If your discipline depends on inspiration, your discipline will remain fragile. But if discipline becomes rooted in identity, something changes. You stop asking every day whether you feel like doing what is right. You begin to understand, this is the standard. This is the path. This is the kind of person I am trying to become. That is a more durable foundation. But even here, there is danger. Pride. Pride in your discipline. Pride in your self-control. Pride in how much more awake you are than others. Pride in how much less you need. This is one of the final traps. Because the ego can wear the clothes of discipline very easily. It can turn restraint into superiority. It can turn progress into vanity. It can turn self-command into performance. That is why humility must walk beside discipline. Always. You are not climbing this mountain to become better than other people. You are climbing it so you can become less ruled by the worst parts of yourself. That should humble you. Because if you are honest, the battle is still inside you. The craving is still there. The laziness is still there. The pride is still there. The fear is still there. The temptation to delay, escape, seek comfort and protect ego is still there. The work is not finished. And that is not bad news. It keeps you honest. It keeps you teachable. It keeps you watchful. A wise person does not say, I have conquered myself. He says, I must remain awake. That is safer and truer. This brings us to one of the deepest rewards of the path. The process is the reward. Most people imagine discipline as the painful price they pay now so they can finally enjoy life later. But real peace does not wait at the end of discipline. It appears inside it. The peace of waking up and not despising your habits. The peace of knowing you did not abandon yourself today. The peace of speaking with more care. The peace of carrying difficulty without collapse. The peace of using your time with intention. The peace of becoming harder to provoke, harder to distract, and harder to seduce away from your values. That peace is one of the highest rewards a human being can taste, because it comes from something deeper than pleasure. It comes from self-trust. That is why lasting happiness is not found in what you get. It is found in what you become. Not in possession, in formation. Not in applause, in alignment. This is what makes the path worthwhile, even if no one sees it, even if no one praises it, even if life remains difficult. The work itself shapes the soul into something more solid. And that solidity matters more than most external victories ever will. Because external things can be lost. Money can vanish. Status can fade. Beauty can age. Health can change. Circumstances can reverse. But the person you have trained yourself to become remains with you. That is your real possession. Your restraint, your courage, your clarity, your ability to focus, your ability to tell the truth, your ability to stay calm under pressure. No audience can give you those, and no audience can take them away. This is why the Stoics cared so much about the inner life, because the inner life is where lasting strength is built. And yet, with all this seriousness, there is also hope here. You do not have to fix your whole life in one dramatic act. You do not have to become perfect this month. You do not have to erase every weakness at once. You only have to keep climbing. One honest correction, one resisted impulse, one day of clean effort, one moment of silence instead of reaction, one return after failure, one small kept promise. This is enough. Enough to rebuild self-respect. Enough to turn chaos into order. Enough to slowly become someone steadier, clearer, and harder for the world to corrupt. Never underestimate the power of accumulation. A single choice seems small. A single refusal seems small. A single day of discipline seems small. But a life is made of these things, and over years they become destiny. This is why the ordinary matters so much. How you wake, how you speak, how you work, how you handle boredom, how you respond to pain, how you spend an unstructured hour, how you behave when no one is watching. This is where a life is decided, not in grand declarations, in repeated conduct. So if you take one thing from this journey, let it be this: do not wait to feel ready for a lifelong path. Step onto it imperfectly. Do not wait to become fearless before acting. Act while fear is still present. Do not wait to never fail again before respecting yourself. Respect yourself enough to return after failure. Do not wait for a different life before practicing discipline. Practice discipline in the life you already have. That is where transformation begins, right where you are, with the day in front of you, with the habits already shaping you, with the duties already waiting, with the impulses already asking for obedience. You are already on a path. The only question is whether it is a path of conscious formation or unconscious decline. And as this journey closes, remember this: you do not need to become perfect. You do not need to impress the world. You do not need to become legendary. You need to become reliable to your own conscience. That is enough, more than enough. Because a person who can trust himself, govern himself, and return to what is right even after weakness has visited him is already living with rare dignity. So when this video ends, do not let it end as inspiration only. Let it become a decision to take yourself more seriously, A decision to stop handing your life to impulse. A decision to respect your time, guard your attention, endure discomfort, use obstacles, remember death, and let your discipline become a benefit to others. And if this journey spoke to a part of you that has been asking for more from life, do not leave that part silent. Share this with someone who needs it. Leave a comment with the battle you know you must face next. And if this path is one you want to keep walking, stay with this channel. These are not lessons for one night. They are lessons for a lifetime. This reflection may end here, but your life of practice begins again the moment this chapter is over. So breathe deeply, stand up cleanly, go back into your life with more honesty than before, less drama, less excuse, less delay. Stay steady, stay truthful, stay under command, and above all, stay stoic.